Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Life on the Research Trail. I'm Ron Coddington, editor and publisher of Military Images magazine. And I want to talk to you about a very interesting Zouave jacket. But before I get there, I also want to mention that I often talk about the importance of images like this one, Civil War portraits that have unusual and interesting content that can help identify or date or provide additional information about the soldier, about the uniform that he's wearing, about the equipment, and other aspects. So think of a Civil War portrait photograph, and any photograph for that matter, as being a piece of evidence with clues that can help you in your photo sleuthing. And while I talk about these individual images, often I don't always mention that a grouping of images can really provide additional insights that a single image isn't always going to be able to provide. And such is the case here. Thanks to the work of Mike Houston and others, we have a group of 16 identified images, count them, 16 identified images of soldiers who served in a particular regiment, the 28th Iowa Infantry. Now, for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with Civil War portrait photography, having 16 from one regiment is really quite nice because it allows you to do some additional evaluation when you can look at 16, and when they're all identified, even better. So the reason that I'm interested in this particular group, as I mentioned, thanks to Mike Houston, is because of the uniform, the jacket. Just take a look at it. It is technically of the Zouave style. And maybe the best way I can describe it is to use a quote by Dan Miller, who is the author of a fantastic book. It's called American Zouaves, 1859 to 1959. Dan is a friend. He's worked on this project, this book. It was a long time project, and it is truly the encyclopedia. It's my go-to encyclopedia for Zouaves. Dan writes, while not originally uniformed as Zouaves, this regiment created one of the most unique and readily identifiable uniforms of the war. Just take a look at it. You can see the lace that starts at the top, or the trim that starts at the bottom of the collar. It goes down, it follows the buttons of the uniform, and then it curves back around the base of the jacket, around the soldier's waist, which you can't see here, but the line continues horizontal on the waist. It begins to loop back up around, makes a little loop that is also not visible here, but then it cuts across the chest, as you can see here, and comes up, and on either side of the chest you see a star on one side and a shield on the other. If you look at all 16 photographs, most of them have the star and the shield. There are variations, and I'm going to save those for another time. But what I want to talk about is one of the reasons that the 16 identified images were particularly helpful. Because one of the open questions about this regiment is, well, if they didn't start out as a Zouave regiment, how did they get these Zouave jackets? And so what I did is I took all 16 names of those soldiers, and I went into a database, which researchers know as HGS, but it's the Civil War Historical Data Systems database, and was able to find all of these 16 soldiers. And I created a concurrent timeline, which means I took their service records, when they mustered in and when they mustered out, and plotted them to be able to see when they were all in the regiment. Was there a certain time when they were all together? And then I also looked at the ranks, like the sergeant here, the first sergeant pictured here, when did he get appointed or promoted to that rank? So I was able to make that timeline. And what I learned is that this set of photographs was made somewhere between September of 1863 and February of 1864. So that time period we're talking about a 6-month time period becomes really interesting, because there's another detail on the back of these photographs. We have the name of the photographer and the city in which that photographer worked. And guess what? They're all consistent dated to or located in New Orleans, Louisiana. And so the 28th Iowa was in New Orleans for a stint in August to September of 1863, and then around the city from roughly Christmas of 1863 to March of 1864. So now our timeline is basically, I would say, December to March, December 1863 to March of 1864. And so this is new information about this jacket. And to answer the question of how it was that they got those jackets, here's a bit of information that might help. Before the 28th Iowa came to the New Orleans area, guess where they were? They were on the Vicksburg campaign, from the earliest parts around the Yazoo expedition all the way through the surrender, the siege and surrender of Vicksburg. So imagine these guys for the better part of 6 to 9 months in the Vicksburg area, in the swampy lands, in the inhospitable climate with the hot sun, for months and months and months. When they were done, and I should also mention, disease, battle deaths taking a toll. Imagine this depleted regiment who had been in the field for many months. They finally get a chance to rest in New Orleans. So they rest, they resupply. Their morale has probably taken a bit of a hit from being on the campaign for so long. And yet their morale was probably boosted a little bit because they got to participate in the capture of Vicksburg. But still, they had been through a lot. And so new uniforms, new supplies, new equipment must have been part of the R&R that they took while they're in the New Orleans area. So this may help explain why in this set of images they are wearing these really interesting Zouave jackets compared to earlier war portraits when they're not wearing Zouave jackets or Zouave uniforms. So there's a lot more to the story, and you can find out more in Military Images magazine, our winter issue. We have a department called Material Culture, and our Material Culture column is dedicated to this jacket. So you can learn a lot more there. And I hope you'll subscribe. You can go to militaryimagesmagazine.com for more information, or shopmilitaryimages.com and pick up a subscription. So hope you'll check it out. I hope you also check out more videos. Until then, happy trails.